Suffering is something which doesn't come naturally to us. We don't really know how to respond to it. But over time, like anything else, we can learn to deal with it in a way which can reduce as much hardship as possible. Over the years, I've learned a couple of those things myself, and I want to share them with you. The first point, which you may have heard before, is that our reactions to our problems can often far exceed the problem itself. Well, what do I mean by that? When we react to something, our reaction can be far bigger in magnitude than what originally happened, and so now we have two problems. The one which we couldn't control and just seemed to happen, and then the one which we can control in response to what originally happened. Those problems that we create often get blown out of proportion because they're often imbued with all of the stories of resistance that we tell ourselves when something happens that we didn't necessarily want to happen, and so we feel a lot of resentment. We feel like life would be so much better if we didn't have it, and all of these kinds of stories which just make it all the more worse. Maybe the stories are about how you don't deserve this, or how it's getting in the way of something you want, or how it's about the fact that you just can't handle it. Here's the interesting thing though. We think that a lot of the suffering is emanating from the original event that happened, and we don't take into account all of the resistance and all the stuff going inside us, which is accounting for most of the suffering. Because of that, we don't see that there's actually a window of opportunity to make things easier for us, because we can't change the fact that the original thing happened, but we can always change how we are responding to that event. Viktor Frankl says that between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. So that's just basically saying that after something happens, we get a short little window of time to decide how we want to deal with it. And the default pathway that we usually take is one which makes it a lot harder for us, and it's just something kind of instinctual. But what if we could use that little window to just kind of pause for a second and not run that automatic loop? What would happen then? Well, we would just be left with the pain of the original event itself, and we wouldn't have to deal with any of the collateral damage of how we have responded to it. So we want to make it very clear in our heads what is the original problem and what is the stuff that we are throwing onto it. Because that allows us to start to make that change. We need to be aware of that split. That may sound trivial at face value, but it can take a level of awareness to be able to do that. Meditation is something which is fantastic at fostering that level of awareness, because meditation is all about just stepping back and becoming that awareness and watching everything going past in the screen of the mind. And so you gain that separation between what you're seeing and what I suppose is watching the screen, and it allows you to start pulling yourself out of the mind, because that's essentially what we're doing. We're just trying to pull ourselves out one way or another. And with that awareness, we want to interrupt that pattern. And so when we see those stories starting to play, all of those thoughts of resistance, we can just realize that they have started and call them out. Basically say, well, this is just a story. That's what I say in my head a lot of the time to pull myself out. Because simply just labeling what's happening is one of the most powerful things you can do to stop the, I suppose, automatic events of rumination. For me, when I label it and say this is just a story, it stops the thoughts from going any further, because if I don't label them, then it's like I'm giving them permission to just go and ruminate and make things tougher. An example of one of these stories is a very common one: someone cutting you off in traffic, and the events happen, there's nothing you can do about it, but now you're left with a short little window to decide, am I going to ridicule this person who cut me off and say how they're a complete idiot for doing that and just make myself feel terrible, or am I just going to accept the fact that it's happened and catch myself about to ruminate and say, okay, this is just a story that I'm about to play in my head, and just try and leave it at that? Because the idea is once you've said this is just a story, that it just kind of dissipates and you go back to your day. But easier said than done, and this is a practice, and you shouldn't expect yourself to be able to do it straight away. And so it doesn't matter about the morals of the situation, who was good and who was bad. It's more about just reducing any unnecessary collateral damage to yourself. The key idea here is that we don't want to make things even harder than they already are, because chances are that just the event occurring in itself, without all of our reaction to it and all of our resistance, is enough to be dealing with, especially if it's already happened. Because if something's happened, then we're never going to be able to change the fact that it's happened. You may be thinking, well, Alex, if a driver cuts me off in traffic and I find myself really annoyed, like, I didn't decide to be angry. There was no window where, I failed the choice and became, angry. That's just something which happened. And I absolutely agree with you. There may be a period of time where you need to just start thinking in this new way of, well, it's already happened. And so by getting angry about it, nothing's going to really benefit me from doing that. And it's like a belief that you program in over time. And what that can do is take out that automatic anger that you feel, because it's like you've decided on an unconscious level that there's no space for it. This is something which I've been training to work on the last couple of years, and I'm at the point now where if I drop a drink on the ground or my phone and I crack the screen, I just kind of look at it, and on an unconscious level I know that it's already happened, and it's not going to serve me at all to get annoyed about this because it's already happened. And because I've been thinking that way for a while in preparation for this event of dropping my phone, I've already accepted it the very second I look at it. It's basically how it is, and it's a place that you can get to as well. And it's one which can really drastically improve these kinds of things in your life. So our mindset shifts can affect our emotions later on, and we can prevent all this kind of frustration. I suppose now I just see it as a waste of time and energy, because if something's already happened, why bother wasting any energy on it? Yes, it's going to be annoying to deal with it, but I would rather just deal with it because the original problem is enough as it is and not face any of the collateral damage. And you may think that, well, this just sounds easy for you, Alex, but how the heck can I do it because I have such a temperament of anger? And even if that's the case, I still think that this is something that you can program in over time just by changing the way that you think, and you might be surprised at where you end up. And of course, this is more about the smaller events in life and not the bigger, more tragic ones, which of course you absolutely do have a reason to be reacting the way you are. Another idea here is this idea of surrendering to the flow of events in life. And this has been notoriously difficult for me because I've always really wanted a sense of control of what's going on, and if I'm facing difficult things and I don't feel like I have a way to navigate them, then that would be enormously difficult. I just didn't want to let whatever was happening to me happen to me because it was too uncomfortable to meet myself where I was. But again, I was making this far worse with all of these ideas of what this could look like in the future and how I might be struggling then, and again, those are the stories. But for you, you may have found that meeting yourself where you are in your suffering has been just impossible. And I have a tip for you, and it's something which comes out of the AI revolution. ChatGPT has this voice mode where you can essentially talk to it now, and it can be amazingly good at helping you navigate things that you're feeling inside of yourself, and can give you a kind of customized approach to helping you. And I promise this isn't a sponsor. I'm telling you this because I have used it extensively for trying to navigate just this, and it has been pretty amazing. Now, this all relates to this idea of Wu Wei, which in Chinese Taoism is all about letting the flow of events in life just happen without resistance. A big part of this kind of acceptance for me was working on the mental domain, where I would just find myself resisting things because of how good life could have been if I didn't have what I was experiencing. But again, it's frivolous to think in this way because what's happening is already happening. Eckhart Tolle says, always say yes to the present moment. What could be more futile, more insane, than to create inner resistance to something that already is? Although easier said than done, sometimes saying yes is incredibly difficult, and it's a skill in itself to even be able to do that. And it can feel like we're giving up when we say yes, like we're surrendering to it and we're never going to get better. But that's not the case. It just means that we are getting rid of any collateral damage in the moment. With some things in life, they just have to pass through us. And by allowing ourselves to, over time, dip our toes into meeting ourselves where we are more often, then we start to build up this agency within ourselves to just be in flow with what's happening. And this also applies to even some of the hardest things that we can experience. I've been learning to do this with chronic back pain that I've had for over a decade. And if I can manage to do this, or even begin to start doing that, with that kind of pain, then I promise you that it's likely you can with whatever you're experiencing. But as I said, this is a long-term practice, and it's in a way it's kind of a lifestyle shift as we're learning to bring in new ways of living into our existence in a way that just feels habitual and second nature over time. And as I said, ChatGPT can walk you through that experience, and you can even ask it questions in real time, and you can also ask questions here. Leave a comment if you'd like. There's more to be said about how to suffer well, but I thought I'd leave the video here for now. That will be posted in the future, but thank you for watching this one, and I hope it was helpful. We'll see you later.